I swear, I thought I was being pranked. One minute I'm on my porch, sipping coffee, scrolling on my phone, and the next, there's a stranger in a blazer walking up my driveway, holding a manila envelope like it's a gift from the heavens. She hands it to me without saying a word, turns on her heel, and leaves. I tear it open, and my eyes nearly fall out of my head. I'm being sued for violating HOA rules. The only problem? I didn't even live in an HOA. Oh, trust me, this story gets wild. So before I tell you how I went from being sued by a complete stranger to dissolving her entire HOA 3 minutes into a hearing, hit that like button so YouTube knows you enjoy watching bullies get exactly what's coming to them. And subscribe, because I've got more of these stories than I probably should admit. I'd bought my house for one reason: no HOA. I'd spent the first 10 years of my adult life trapped in one, and I'd had enough of compliance committees, color swatches, and letters about my trash bins being visible to the public. When I moved to my new place, I did my homework. Read the deed. Checked the county records. Made sure nothing tied me to an HOA, and for 2 peaceful years, it was perfect, until she moved in next door. Her real name was Patricia, but everyone in the neighborhood started calling her Karen within weeks. She was the kind of woman who would introduce herself by telling you what you were doing wrong. The first time I met her, she knocked on my door holding a measuring tape, informing me that my mailbox was 2 inches too tall for community standards. I told her, politely, that there were no community standards here. She smiled in that tight, condescending way and said, "Oh, we'll see about that." It started small. Notes left on my car about street parking limits. Complaints about my lawn. Passive-aggressive flyers on my porch about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics. Then, one day, she showed up with a clipboard and told me she was forming an HOA. I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. But apparently, in her mind, she could just create one and force everyone to join. Fast forward a few months, and that envelope shows up. It's a lawsuit, claiming I'd violated HOA bylaws by installing non-approved fencing and using property in a non-compliant manner. The kicker? She claimed the HOA had retroactive authority over all homes in a 5-block radius, even ones, like mine, that were never part of it, and she was asking for $12,000 in fines. I probably should have been angry. But instead, I laughed. Because if Karen wanted to play legal hardball, I already knew something she didn't. She just handed me the perfect excuse to enter HOA before it even started. The morning after I got served, I called up a friend of mine, Ethan. He's not just a lawyer. He's one of those guys who gets this little smirk when he smells blood in the water. I told him the whole story, from Karen's 2 inches too tall mailbox complaint to this brand new fantasy HOA she was running out of her living room. He didn't even try to hide his laugh. She really thinks she can enforce bylaws on a house that's never been in an HOA? Oh, this is gonna be fun. By fun, Ethan meant digging. Within hours, he pulled the official HOA registration documents Karen had filed with the county. It was even better than we thought. She'd registered the HOA only 4 months ago. Her bylaws were riddled with legal holes, vague terms, no proper voting process, no clear property boundaries, and here's the kicker: she hadn't filed the mandatory conflict of interest disclosures, which meant if this went to court, she wasn't just looking at losing the case, she was looking at having the HOA dissolved on the spot. Word travels fast in a neighborhood. Once I told a couple of my closest neighbors what Karen had pulled, the floodgates opened. One guy, Steve, told me she'd already fined him $250 for leaving his garbage can out overnight, even though she had zero authority. Another neighbor, Maria, said Karen had threatened to take legal action if she didn't repaint her shutters to a more neutral tone. I realized something: it wasn't just me she was targeting. She was trying to intimidate the whole block into giving her control. Ethan and I met up at my kitchen table one evening, papers spread everywhere, and came up with the plan: file a motion to dismiss the lawsuit based on lack of jurisdiction. Simultaneously, File a petition to dissolve the HOA due to improper formation and failure to follow legal requirements. Bring sworn statements from neighbors showing her history of harassment and false claims. It wasn't just about winning my case. It was about making sure Karen could never pull this stunt on anyone again. Karen must have thought I was panicking, because she kept doubling down. She sent me final notice letters warning me that my fines were accruing daily. She left a voicemail telling me she was prepared to escalate this to the maximum extent allowed by law. I didn't respond. Not a word, because in less than a week, we'd be standing in front of a judge, and she had no idea what was about. To hit her, the night before the hearing, Ethan called me. "You ready for this?" he asked. "Oh, I've been ready since the mailbox incident," I told him. We both laughed. But deep down, I knew this was going to be one of those moments where you either walk out a victim or a victor, and I had no intention of walking out a victim. Court was set for 9 a.m. on a Thursday. I got there early, partly because I didn't want to risk being late, and partly because I wanted to see Karen walk in. Sure enough, at 8:45, here she came. Power walking in a navy blazer, hair sprayed so stiff it could stop a bullet, and that same tight little smirk she'd given me the first day she measured my mailbox. She didn't even glance my way. Just marched straight over to her table, dropped her giant binder with a thunk, and started whispering with a guy in an ill-fitting suit. I assumed her lawyer. When the judge walked in, we all stood, then sat again. He looked like the kind of guy who'd seen it all, calm, no nonsense, and probably immune to whatever drama Karen was about to unleash. Her lawyer went first, laying out their claim that my property fell under the jurisdiction of the newly formed HOA, and that I'd racked up thousands in fines by ignoring their rules. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood up slowly, like he had all the time in the world. "Your Honor," he began, "this entire case rests on a false premise. That my client is subject to an HOA that, legally speaking, does not and has never applied to his property." He handed the judge a copy of my deed, the county map, and the HOA's own registration paperwork. The HOA in question, Ethan continued, was improperly formed, has no legal jurisdiction over properties outside its original, non-existent boundaries, and has failed to comply with multiple statutory requirements. The judge started flipping through the documents. Karen's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, then the judge looked up and asked Karen directly, "Ma'am, can you provide the legal description of your HOA's boundaries?" Karen blinked. "Well, it's the whole neighborhood," she said, gesturing. Vaguely, the judge's eyebrow went up. "Do you have that in your bylaws?" Her lawyer flipped through her binder like he was digging for a winning lottery ticket. "Nothing." It was almost anticlimactic. After less than 3 minutes of reviewing the paperwork, the judge turned back to us. "Motion to dismiss is granted. The HOA, as currently registered, is hereby declared null and void due to improper formation and lack of statutory compliance." Translation? Karen's shiny new HOA was dead. Gone. Erased from existence. Karen's face went pale, then bright red. She started to stand, probably to argue, but the judge held up a hand. "Ma'am, this matter is concluded. Please step down." Her lawyer packed up slowly, avoiding eye contact with her. Meanwhile, Ethan and I just sat there, both trying not to grin too hard, because while the legal part was over, I knew the neighborhood fallout was only just beginning. By the time I got home from court, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Steve from 2 houses down had already heard the news. Maria texted me, "So, the dragon is dead?" with about 5 laughing emojis. Apparently, someone who'd been in the courtroom with us had posted about it in the neighborhood Facebook group before. I even left the parking lot. The headline? Karen's HOA dissolved in 3 minutes flat. By the end of the week, everyone knew. Neighbors who'd been quietly putting up with her nonsense suddenly found their voices. Steve marched right up to her door and demanded she return the $250 she'd fined him for leaving his garbage can out. Maria told me she'd ripped the compliance notice off her mailbox and dropped it in Karen's driveway. Even the people who'd been neutral started turning. Because when you see someone exposed as a fraud in public, it's like the spell breaks. About a week later, a printed letter appeared in every mailbox. It was from Karen. She wrote, in stiff, overly formal language, that, due to unforeseen legal circumstances, the HOA was no longer active. No apology. No admission of wrongdoing, but the kicker? At the bottom, in tiny font, was a line that read, "Please continue to respect the neighborhood aesthetic and community standards." Translation: I may not have power anymore, but I still want to boss you around. Needless to say, no one took her seriously. One Saturday morning, I was out front trimming the hedges when I saw her struggling with a giant pile of branches she'd pruned from her own yard. She was dragging them toward the curb, clearly irritated. Normally, I'm a decent neighbor. I would have offered to help. But instead, I just nodded, sipped my coffee, and thought about how she'd once threatened to fine me for planting a tree she didn't like. 2 hours later, the city yard waste truck rolled by and skipped her house. Apparently, she hadn't tied the branches correctly according to city regulations. For once, she was the one getting the non-compliance treatment. The funniest part? Once Karen stopped patrolling the streets like a mall cop, the neighborhood actually got nicer. People painted their shutters whatever color they wanted. Kids left bikes on their lawns without fear of a $50 violation. The tension just evaporated, and I realized something. The whole community standards thing she preached wasn't about making the place better. It was about making herself feel important. A couple months later, I spotted Karen at the grocery store. She was in the baking aisle, staring at cake mixes like she'd just been told the meaning of life was hidden in a Betty Crocker box. When she noticed me, there was this flicker of recognition, and something else. Resentment. Like she was still mad I'd taken away her empire. She didn't say a word. Just turned her cart and went the other way. And honestly, that was the sweetest victory of all of these days. The cabin feels different. Quieter. Like the air itself got lighter when her ridiculous HOA vanished. I sit on the porch in the mornings with my coffee, watching the sun hit the treeline, and I think about how close I came to just paying her to make the problem go away. If I'd done that, she'd still be running around handing out fake fines and intimidating my neighbors. That's the thing about bullies, they count on you being too tired, too busy, or too scared to push back. They thrive on making you feel like resistance isn't worth it, but the moment you shine a light on their nonsense, they crumble. Because deep down, their power was never real to begin with. So if you've got a Karen in your life, HOA or otherwise, don't just roll over. Know your rights. Do your homework. And remember, you don't have to match their volume, just their persistence. Anyway, that's my story about how a power-hungry HOA president tried to squeeze me for money, and ended up losing her entire little kingdom in 3 minutes flat. If you enjoyed hearing how it all went down, hit that like button, it really helps the channel. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, I'd love to hear your stories. And if you want more real-life revenge tales, make sure you're subscribed, because I've got some wild ones coming up next week. See you in the next one.